Baffling questions remain concerning the case of a 5-year-old boy whose body was found in a garbage compactor in Brooklyn yesterday. Jason Carroll's in East New York, where police are looking for answers to a very tragic story. Jason?
And Jack, as you can see, the housing police have set up a mobile command unit out here. At this point, though, the investigation is really stalled. They have no leads at this point, but one question has been answered in all this. Police now know that somebody murdered the child before stuffing him down a trash chute.
In May of 1993, a grisly discovery was made in the East New York section of Brooklyn, New York, in the Linden houses. Now, this area of Brooklyn had experienced its fair share of violent moments in the past, but nothing quite like this. Whenever it involves a child, these types of crimes evoke a feeling of helplessness and fear, with residents on the streets feeling like if it happened to someone else, it can happen to them too.
As I think about my son here, he's the same age group, and I think about the same thing happening to him, which is real sad. It's real tragic.
I got 3 kids of my own, and that makes me scared. And even with parents, it was some crazy guy that did it. It's too much.
They wouldn't be wrong for feeling this way. The news of something cruel being done to a child gives parents and guardians all over a little more reason to hug their children. But not every child is lucky enough to escape that danger. Some are left to suffer a fate so awful that it leaves everybody questioning just how something like this could ever happen.
Happening, a heartbreaking story. A little boy whose short life ended in violent death is remembered, and a final farewell is always cheerful. His mother and his foster mother were choked with grief at his funeral today.
On today's episode of Evil Intentions, this is Lie Away, the story of Kayesean Blackledge.
Before stuffing him down a garbage chute like this one. His body landing in a basement trash compactor. An autopsy showing the boy was dead before the compactor crushed his body. The result is sad.
Kayesean Blackledge was born on September 11th, 1988, and was from Brooklyn, New York. He was born to a young woman by the name of Karen Blackledge and a man by the last name Applewhite. From very early on in little Kayesean's life, he was surrounded by certain issues that he had absolutely no control over. The first of these that he would experience was in November of 1988 at the family's Chauncey Street apartment in Brooklyn, when he was just a young age of only 2 months old. It was then that Kayesean's biological mother, just 15 years old at the time, would get into an altercation with her mother, Kayesean's grandmother. It's unclear how the fight began, but it was said that it resulted in Karen's mother taking her radio and slamming it onto the ground outside in the street. Seeing this made Karen very angry, and the fight escalated even further, and Karen went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife, threatening to stab her own mother. This violent interaction between the two would end with little Keyshawn being removed from the family's home by child services. According to case files, there are mentions of other violent disputes between Keyshawn's mother and grandmother, and even mentions of Keyshawn being left alone at home for long periods of time. Keyshawn's biological father would disappear shortly after Keyshawn was taken out of the home. At the time, Karen believed that he might have been in prison. After a few situations like these took place and time went on, for a short while, little Keyshawn would spend time at the Staten Island Mission for Foster Kids before being put into the care of his aunt, Dana Blackledge. Karen was very young when she had Keyshawn, and those around her understood it would be very hard for her to take care of a kid, being just a teen herself. This would lead to Karen's aunt, Dana, agreeing to take Keyshawn and care for him in 1989, just until Karen could get on her feet and get things in her life in order. According to Karen herself, her aunt Dana provided Keyshawn with lots of care and was also one of the only people that she would trust with Keyshawn. Despite her age, Karen mentioned that she was proud to have Keyshawn, so much so that she named him after her best friend's son. Dana Blackledge, a nurse's aide at the time, was actually born David Blackledge, but since 1979 had been undergoing a series of operations to become a woman at St. Mary's Hospital. Although other reports state that she began saving money for her operation in 1986, a series of operations that were completed in 1991. Keyshawn's mother was grateful she had Dana to take care of her son, because she had fears that if he had gone to a stranger's home, she would eventually lose contact with him and never get him back. When Keyshawn was put into the care of Dana, Karen's mother, Keyshawn's grandmother, would let child welfare agents know that Dana was born a man, But this was fine because it didn't play a role in Keyshawn's safety. She also stated that Dana was asked many questions about her lifestyle during extensive interviews with child welfare, and not once did she ever hide anything. Whether Dana was born a man or not wasn't a factor, and it didn't matter. Keyshawn was cared for, he was loved, and he had whatever he needed. In 1990, Dana Blackledge would leave Brooklyn, New York and move to Jersey City, something Keyshawn's mother didn't exactly agree with. But still, everyone involved felt that Keyshawn was in good hands. On August 26 of 1992, Dana would put a singles ad in the daily newspaper seeking a partner. Now, this was something that was common back then, but what she didn't know was that one of the men who responded to this ad would be the same person responsible for flipping her whole reality and doing even worse to little Keyshawn. The ad stated that Dana was seeking a man between the ages of 34 and 50, someone who was financially stable, seeking marriage, and who was open-minded. 7 men would respond to the ad, one of them being a man by the name Stefan Poole. Dana recalls when the two met down at the World Trade Center for their first time meeting face-to-face. Her first impressions of Poole were that he was a sincere person and that he seemed to be devoted to the things he cared about. He was also described by Dana as a man with old-fashioned ways. He was also quiet and honest. He seemed to have everything that she wanted in a man. The two would hit it off, and it led to them being in a serious relationship, with Stefan Poole proposing to Dana on Valentine's Day of 1993, just a few short months after they first met. They would get married at the Queensborough Hall on the 24th of February, and throughout all of this, little Keyshawn was very much cared for. 4-year-old Kayesean Blackledge was described as a sweet and lively child, a very happy kid who was active and showed everyone love. He was called Boo Boo by his Aunt Dana. He attended Salem Baptist Nursery School in Jersey City, where the teachers all fell in love with him and had nothing but kind things to say about him. According to Dana, when Stefan Poole entered the picture, Keyshawn was immediately attached to him, even calling him dad. Family life between Stefan and Dana with Keyshawn there was going very well, and at one point, Dana even wanted to adopt another child, but she knew she would have to move into a bigger place, so that never happened. Every single night, Dana would sing little Keyshawn a song, since that's how he liked being put to sleep. A song by Diana Ross called Brown Baby, previously recorded by Nina Simone, Mahalia Jackson, and originally performed and written by Oscar Brown Jr. The lyrics speak of keeping a child safe and protected by parents who love them. It also mentions their wish for the child to live in a better world. Some of the lyrics would say, "Lie away sleeping, lie away here in my arms, while your mommy and your daddy protect you and keep you safe from harm. Brown baby, it makes me so glad that you will have things I have never had. Lie away in mommy's arms." She wouldn't stop singing until Keyshawn was fast asleep. Keyshawn would often accompany Dana to Brooklyn, where she would bring him to visit family and friends, and according to those they'd visit, Keyshawn was always seen with a smile on his face and very happy. But not long after Dana and Stefan got married, things would quickly begin to go a completely different route. And on Thursday, May 20th of 1993, their relationship reached a very violent level, and Keyshawn was again in the middle of the entire thing. Media outlets would report that there was a fight about being intimate between Dana and Stefan, and articles mentioned that Keyshawn walked in on the two as they did the deed. But according to Dana, that was very far from the truth. The true nightmare would begin that morning at 5 a.m. when the couple's alarm clock went off. It was then that Stefan would turn to Dana and say, "We have enough time for sex." But when she turned to look at him, he immediately mounted her and began to savagely attack her with a knife, stabbing her. He would then try to duct tape Dana's hands together, but she was able to break free. He apparently kept the knife and tape under his side of the bed the night before, in preparation for the attack. Neighbors stated they could hear the couple fighting on this day and in the days prior. There had been reports of arguments between the two, something that wasn't an issue at first. After breaking loose from the duct tape, with stab wounds in her back and starting to bleed out, Dana would stumble into the hallway of the building and began banging on everyone's door in hopes of getting help. Finally, she was able to get the attention of a delivery man who saw the condition she was in, and he drove her to the nearest hospital. But this would leave little Keyshawn all alone in the home with Stefan Poole. It was said that Keyshawn heard the fight and even yelled at Stefan, pleading with him to not hurt Dana, who he saw as a mother figure. But in a rage, Stefan would leave the home after the attack, and he would take little Keyshawn with him, with Keyshawn only wearing his 18 pajamas, since just a few moments before all of this happened, he was sound asleep until being awoken by the sounds of screams and cries. He put little Keyshawn in the family car and would drive from Jersey City to the Linden houses in East New York. Poole was a city sanitation inspector in Brooklyn. Although his work didn't take him to the Linden houses, he was formerly a cook in the Army and also worked as a corrections officer in New York. According to reports, Poole was on his way to the Linden houses because he was headed to the apartment of someone he knew there. He would only give the name Andrew and stated that he didn't know the man's last name. When he arrived at the building, he would take the elevator to the 8th floor, with Keyshawn right by his side. He stated that he couldn't tell which apartment belonged to his friend because all the doors looked exactly the same. Keyshawn would begin to cry, more than likely from the fear of being in a foreign place with someone who was starting to give off a horrifying vibe. And that's when Poole would begin smacking Keyshawn to keep him quiet, resulting in the child only crying more. He would continue to hit little Keyshawn, and one of the hits was so hard that Keyshawn's head slammed into the wall, and this would end up cracking his skull, as confirmed by a medical examiner. Keyshawn's painful and desperate cries continued, so Poole would begin to choke the life out of little Keyshawn, savagely strangling him, until those cries were no more. As if this wasn't already the worst thing imaginable, he would then take Keyshawn's small body, fold him in half, and stuff him down the incinerator, with Keyshawn's body crashing 8 stories to the basement below, falling directly into the trash compactor, where his small body was crushed. His body was found by a worker in the building a short time later. When Keyshawn's body was found, at first, nobody knew who the little boy was. Officers began to canvass the neighborhood, asking anyone if they recognized the child, as they showed them a police sketch. And on Friday, May 21st of 1993, at around 6:30 p.m., someone made a call to the West District Police Station of Jersey City, and the person on the other end was telling authorities that he was Stefan Poole. He made incriminating statements about Keyshawn and told them that the boy's body was somewhere in East New York. A picture of the boy's battered body was shown to Dana Blackledge while she stood at the hospital. She would then identify the dead child as Keyshawn. It would be 2 long days before he was even identified. Outrage, fear, and shock would take over the borough of Brooklyn and the rest of the city, as the awful details of little Keyshawn's tragic end began to circulate. There were many questions as to just how something like this could ever even happen, and why this child was with someone who would do this to him. But the most important question to authorities was, why take his life? Authorities would speak to Dana Blackledge, who explained the situation, and so now they knew exactly who they were looking for. But Poole was nowhere to be found. Authorities would quickly catch on and started to watch Poole closely, monitoring his every move via computer as he made several ATM transactions. He stood in New York City for 2 days after what he did, and then began making his way down south. He made his way to Tallahassee, Florida, followed by Crestview, Florida, then to Biloxi, Mississippi. He kept on moving, evading authorities the entire time, and would end up in Conroe, Texas, and then Huntsville, Texas. It was here that a Texas state trooper was running a random license plate check at a sobriety checkpoint. A warrant for Poole's arrest was the first thing to show for him. He would make a call to the 75th precinct letting them know that he had Poole in his possession, but the warrant that was popping up was coming up for auto theft. This is when a lieutenant would let that trooper know that they didn't want this man for auto theft. They wanted him for felony murder. He was arrested straight away and extradited back to New York City. When questioned about Keyshawn, he would confess to everything he did. He said he threw Keyshawn down the trash chute because he was sure that he was dead, as if this somehow made his actions any more acceptable. The admission would leave detectives stunned and even more sickened. But this arrest would also lead detectives to look into Poole's past, and it turns out, Poole had an ex-wife who died suspiciously years ago. His wife in 1989, a woman by the name of Michelle Jenkins, was found dead on her basement floor from what medical examiners at the time believed to be a heart attack. But further investigation would lead them to something else, a theory that Poole actually just strangled his wife to death in an attempt to collect a life insurance claim worth upwards of $50,000. When he was asked about this, he would become extremely defensive and tell the detectives that he would fight them tooth and nail if they decided to charge him with her murder. But after reviewing that information, detectives were led to yet another piece of evidence, And this was the fact that when Dana and Stefan first got married, one of the first things that he would suggest was her adding him as a beneficiary on her life insurance plan. She didn't notice any red flags about this, and she didn't think that anything about this was weird. Dana filled out the paperwork, but she never sent it in. But Stefan Poole thought that she did. Dana was also waiting on a settlement for a medical malpractice lawsuit for her sex change operation, since it left her badly scarred. It seems that all along, Stefan Poole had a plan in motion, a plan to try to kill Dana Blackledge for money, and it seems that this was a plan he might have pulled off in the past, at least once before. Stefan Poole was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for the death of Kayesean Blackledge, and according to my research, it seems that he's been a free man since March of 2020. On Tuesday, June 1st of 1993, a funeral for Kayesean Blackledge was held at the Lawrence Woodard Funeral Home in Brooklyn. Hundreds would gather to remember the young boy who was loved by all and who would be greatly missed. His funeral program read, "Though my house was tossed out with the refuse, my spirit is intact. I am not garbage. I am the soul of an angel." Everyone from family, friends, teachers, and even people who didn't know Keyshawn or his family would attend his funeral because the story was just so tragic, they wanted to pay proper respects. The kind words shared about Keyshawn were quickly outweighed by the grief that permeated through the funeral home. Dana would lean over into little Keyshawn's coffin and leave him a cassette tape, a tape of him and his classmates practicing a song for preschool graduation, a graduation that he would never get to attend. Kayesean Blackledge, Keyshawn's biological mother, would almost collapse as that grief took hold of her. She never wanted to lose her son. She wanted him back as soon as she got her life in order. But now, all she had was this one final moment, the moment that she buried her son, to never see him again. Reverend John Pratt had this to say in his heartbreaking eulogy: "I did not know you, young fellow, but I know that you are somewhere where there is a better life, a place where the flowers never die. If there are no toys there, don't worry about it. If there are no games there, don't worry about it. You're going to be in heaven all day." Rest in peace to Kayesean Blackledge, and my deepest condolences go out to his family. You aren't forgotten.